Good morning and afternoon.
Good afternoon. Yep, got that right. It's been a good one. Out walking this morning.
Oh, nice. Did you do some painting?
No, I haven't done that actually for quite a few days. I had to finish a project. So that always takes all of my creative energy to get it
Yeah,
done.
yeah, yeah. Good morning, Annie. How are you?
Good morning. I am fine. I've had a lovely morning with the sun and the birds and the bushes.
It's great.
Can't ask for more than that.
I know it's beautiful, a fresh morning.
And we
And
had,
and then open up the TV to Sheldon to Merlin Sheldrake. Well,
oh,
not computer, not TV, but Merlin Sheldrake in Entangled Life, and I happen to have his book, um, but that's it. Life is entangled. Everything's part of everything, and that's just so cool.
And I was taking an online course on organic chemistry, and you wouldn't believe how entangled it is. All those little, well, atoms and I mean individual atoms, but most of them are compounds that sort of float around, and some are proteins, more complex. And they're all just floating around. I mean, it's just incredible. It's this soup that courses through our veins and arteries and so forth, the blood. It's not just the blood, though. There's interstitial fluids, and it's not just lymph. I mean, it's quite an extraordinary process. And it's mind-boggling. Quite
so
definitely.
what prompted you to take a course in organic chemistry?
Um,
Good morning, Mark.
I never took it.
Okay.
And now I know why. I mean, the amount of memorization is
Yes.
incredible. All these reactions. And to really master the course, you have to, of course, memorize all of these chemical reactions and their sequences. And it's just mind-boggling. I can understand now why people used to groan in college about organic chemistry. Be the hardest course of all. But it was great fun to take it without being tested. You just get the concept.
Yes. Yeah. Yeah.
I mean,
Because
just the process of piercing through the cellular wall is incredible. And there are all kinds of different reactions to allow the flow, stop the flow, and triggers that regulate timing. I mean, Mark, this all began because Annie mentioned just how wonderfully entangled life is. And this is an example.
yes.
Entangled life. It is. It's fascinating. We live in a soup. We're soup. We're life's soup. Everything's part of everything. I love it. and and it's so wonderful to begin my morning in that framework outside of my apartment, interacting with the leaves and the breeze, and it's just, life is just amazing. when we realize we're part of everything and everything is part of us. for real.
Mm.
It's humbling. It touches into our capacity of worship.
Mhm.
Like, yeah,
And that's something we really need to cultivate more, that capacity for worship.
Yeah.
and all I had was a cup of chai tea at Starbucks. I mean, that's it. Just the trees and the breeze and the leaves does it for me.
Yeah, we had 4 inches of snow yesterday, so that changes the landscape.
Snow.
Yeah.
Oh, yeah, because you're in Washington State.
Yeah, yeah.
Yeah,
So we're further north. Yeah.
yeah.
But it has its own beauty, of course, until you're driving.
Yeah. I feel so fortunate that I found myself in Santa Barbara. I'm just so grateful for Barbara Marks Hubbard to draw me to this state, this this city that is now mine.
Mm.
Just looking at the mountains.
So, Robert, what have you been able to extrapolate from organic chemistry and put into construction?
Personally, not much, because I encountered it too late in life.
Yeah.
But I did, when I was going down to Georgia Tech to do, criticism of architecture classes. Um, I ran into this woman who teaches a course on biomimicry.
Mhm.
That is fascinating. And trust me, she's really putting that kind of knowledge to work in terms of how do you create structures, or how do you create structures in the same line of design, you might say, as living forms. And I sat in on a couple of her courses, and it was a little difficult for me to understand at the time, but it was fascinating. So there is work being done in this regard, just not by me. Now, when I was younger in Oregon, we used to, we had living roofs,
So, yeah, that was what.
sod roofs and, different things like that.
So that's what came up for me. How would you talk about the difference between biomimicry and, I don't know, passive design, or using nature's design, which is, I've been around for like centuries. I mean, that's how original peoples did a lot of their building, was to really mimic nature. Not so much, I don't know if mimic is quite the right word, but they certainly used what nature offered and made it inherent in the architecture. I guess I want to say that. And so how would you see that as different from biomimicry, or is it the same thing?
Biomimicry is actually to utilize the same strategies that natural living forms use.
Mm-hmm.
So the mimicry is there. The solar passive solar is very much a set of directives I mean, it can be done with concrete, steel, wood, and of course glass. So it's kind of a different side of things. Much of the use of much of zero carbon construction has to do with these sorts of strategies, directives. Very few are actually working with so it's an interesting.
Yeah, Mark's critique is one that I have of biomimicry. I really totally respect Jeannie Benyus and what she's done, but it's still about the use of nature. It's very much, I mean, well, it was product development focus. That's what she started, and it was a great wedge to get business to think about that. But there still is that deeper place that I think she's kind of moving into. The last I heard from her, which was quite some time ago now, she was sort of retiring to write a book. She was trying to distill the principles.
I'm not familiar with her work.
Well, she has only written one book as far as I know, and it's called Biomimicry, and it was the introduction of that idea. And it's wonderful, but it's still really about using nature. And I know in the work she's done, she's gotten to be much more appreciative of nature in a deeper way than she might have started out with. I mean, the key value in my value set is hers. All actions create the conditions that support life. I mean, that's majestic. But so I feel personally that she's kind of on that crux of going from using nature to this more deeper place, and if she can distill principles like that one, it will be very profound. But I haven't heard anything from her, so I don't know where she is in life and what she's doing. And certainly biomimicry has taken off. It's got an institute. It's got all sorts of programs that it runs and all that kind of stuff.
And Georgia Tech is following through.
Yeah,
They have division, whatever, that carries these courses.
Yeah, Carl Welty is a guy that I have met in GRC, actually. He's an architect, and he's a really strong proponent of passive design, where the buildings really mimic the rocks around them, and they're responding and holding energy and releasing energy in a way that's natural, that doesn't require mechanistic stuff. And so he's really delightful to talk about how simple it is, and that kind of thing. But it's, I'm not sure how that would fit into how they approach architecture from a biomimicry perspective. I've not experienced that.
Well, also things have changed a lot since the early 70s. We were doing a lot of projects almost as in play, and creating projects that were where we were subjecting lifestyle to the actual theory of how the heating and cooling and water conduction and so forth, how it all worked. That's not what's being done today. When you talk about meeting the environmental standards in building construction, they want to keep 72 degrees Fahrenheit no matter what, and the standards are being held at quite a high level, actually. Just for heating alone. And then for water use, it's ridiculous. It's like 10 times, we use 10 times the amount of water. Or electric, we definitely use huge surplus of electricity than we did in the 1970s. So that's part of it. So biomimicry, I'm sure, was being done by certain people using a different name, perhaps in the 70s. It was based on a whole different prospect that we could change our living in order to live reasonably within the constraints of these new systems. And that's not in the cards anymore. It has to be meeting up. Nature has to meet
our standard. Yeah, beautifully said. Yes. Yeah.
I'd like to read what Mark has put in chat, and then have him expand on it if he would like. Is from my academic writing about, no, wait a minute.
The 9 principles.
Yeah, right. Not 9 principles underlying nature's designs. Nature runs on sunlight, uses only the energy it needs, fits form to function, recycles everything, rewards cooperation, banks on diversity. I don't know what that means. Demands local expertise, curbs excesses from within, and taps the power of limits. And that's from Vinyas. Janine, expound on that, please, whoever wants to.
I would just add one.
Go ahead.
Demands local expertise, demands local materials. That's a very, very big one, to use what's actually available.
Yeah.
Only traveling a few miles rather than thousands.
Yeah, I love the curbs excess from within. And Mark, I'd love to hear your thoughts on tap the power of limits.
Yeah, it's kind of one of those things where like it's hard for me personally to engage with because I think it's missing so much. It's too superficial and not fundamental enough. And so it's kind of hard to sort of say too much more than that because it's sort of talking about something that is missing something that's fundamental.
What do you see missing?
Sorry?
What do you see missing?
Well, if we overlaid that, so I mean, my comment below kind of gets at this a little bit, is that it's describing things that we see quite superficially, but it's not pointing to what's underneath or bringing forth these things that we're seeing. And so it's kind of like it's helpful, but it's not close enough to the core, the root of these things, to then be informed by that to allow these things to come about and also express in what we do as humans. So it's sort of simply too superficial. It's directionally helpful and kind of right, but it hasn't gone far enough.
I don't understand what you just said. Can you like?
I don't know. How about you, Robert? Could you say something?
Well, no, I got that. I mean, but I'm not going to try to think up my own words. I like this one. For me, biomimicry falls short in its very concept, because humanity is not being asked to mimic nature without understanding it fundamentally. Humanity is being asked to be nature. And I think that is very valid. That's a beautiful point to make. That just, certainly in the 70s, we wanted to be hippies. So, we weren't trying to be nature. Well, maybe we were, but in a very abstract way, which we didn't understand. And that's a very important point for the future, the development of this idea.
Yeah, my my understanding of conscious evolution somehow comes in here because nature evolves. We are nature. So so to consciously evolve, I mean, I am so much part of nature that I can partner in all the time in any way with with nature from an evolutionary perspective. When something evolves, it complexifies, but that's only one principle. But I mean, I love the idea of conscious evolution because nature evolves, which means I evolve, which means I become more complex, which means I'm part of everything. I mean,
But
that kind
within the power of limits, that's to me the strength of that particular statement, is that those limits is what generates the evolution, and staying within them and honoring them is what creates the pressure to do something different. When we get rid of the limits, we reduce that pressure. And so we're just doing more of the same because we're, to Robert's point, we're making nature be us instead of the other way around. And by keeping those limits, then that's the partnership. That's where that partnership comes from, and where that the the energy for difference begins, where emergence happens, is in that tension of limits. Yeah.
nice.
I think this the introduction of evolution into this conversation, Arnie, is like, if we kind of remember what happens or what we think happens in evolution, it in David Sloan Wilson's work, it's variation, selection, and replication, or variation, selection, and retention, is kind of capturing Darwinian and generalized Darwinian or multi-level selection. And what that can remind us here is that what we have done as a collective humanity has got to the point where, not necessarily consciously, but we've essentially been emerging or expressing a mechanistic world that is more mechanistic than living. And what our natural environment that we're doing in this within is very close to saying, you can't do that anymore. And only variation that is doing something else will persist or will be selected for and continue. So we have this humanity that, again, without a whole bunch of consciousness, has co-emerged this mechanistic and not living world. And if we really step into conscious evolution, that would suggest that the way that humanity in the sort of the next iteration of it flourishes is when the first seeds of humanity that isn't trying to make the world mechanistic, but is instead being nature and being in relationship with nature, as that seed grows and starts to become a more robust expression of itself within, as communities and places, those will have the fundamental alignment with the living world to be selected for when the current humanity that's mechanistic and not living doesn't. So it's kind of, we're very much, if we're able to sort of see it and be aware of it, we're participating in this evolutionary phase of humanity where the version that can't continue on this planet very much longer will end, and the new will come out of like isolated pockets of it.
Yeah.
which in some ways kind of taps the power of limits, and so it relates to taps the power of limits, where limits are essentially for a given thing. In this case, we're talking about a humanity. The environment that it is in has bounds on what is acceptable or not, and if it goes outside of those, then it will end.
Yeah.
Kathryn and Robert, I had difficulty following him. Can you express in your own words what you got that resonates with you?
I'd love to.
If anything.
I'd love to. I mean, okay, so 50 years ago, I was fascinated to read Teilhard de Chardin. Now, I'm not claiming that I'm replicating it right now, but I was left with some ideas that's what I'm going to speak to. Technique was the huge word in his work. To me, that meant mankind using his and her mind to, pick out what they, a strategy, a way of development that they wanted to do, to be wanted, what humanity desires for itself. And I think we're coming to the end of nature's ability to support that. We cannot step out of this natural set of limits any longer. It's just not going to be possible. And and technique has to do with everything. I mean, it's not just the technical world. I mean, we have plans for even how we go take a walk. The leash for the dog, the heavy, the certain clothing that we wear, even changing into spandex if we want to do a little running. You know what I'm saying? I mean, it's all modeled on a social concept, social design, social needs. And all of that, I think, was summarized as technique and the world that it created. And we're seeing the death of that. I'm quite certain in the not too distant future. But I'm also seeing the possibility of a real emergence. I mean, that's what keeps me going. Otherwise, I'd go out to Arizona and walk into the desert and say goodbye.
So,
That's where I go to. I love Arizona.
So, Kathryn, can you synthesize what Robert and Mark have said?
Well, I think they did really well. It's the difference between separate and connected, basically. That when you're connected to something, you work with it, and its needs and desires become important in the solution instead of being disregarded in the solution. And we've gotten very good at disregarding the needs and desires of anything else that's living except us. And so we just do what we want to do, what our needs and desires, and they feed on each other because it's not connected to anything else. So this lack of relationship, this lack of connection has become empty and feels empty. And that feeds the need, the desire to do more, to create an interest, because that's the only engagement we have, is that interest in doing something unique. Because we're not in relationship and we don't see the genesis of novelty that happens in relationship. We only see it in manipulation of things. And that limitation is going to be the death of us if we don't rediscover the joy of limitations, the joy of working with and partnering with things. We've kind of gotten to the state where sacrifice is a really dirty word, and it's a painful word, and it's something that we really resist, instead of understanding that sacrifice is the way in which you stay in relationship, the giving up of something of yours for the benefit of others. And when you can see the artistry in that, not just the pain of loss, which is what we're caught in, then it becomes actually quite a euphoric place to be, because it really is generative. You really get very creative, and there's such a satisfaction in the fit that you don't get in any other way. But when you fit in with things, there's just this euphoria that happens. It's just honoring everything. And I think our missing of that gets shifted over into the excitement of the chase, of speed, of danger, all those kinds of things that we substitute for the euphoria and actually comfort that comes from fitting in relationship. And then there's this angst and yearning underneath all that excitement, because it still isn't right. It's like eating junk food. You can be full, but you're still not complete. You're still looking for something, because it just isn't quite right. And the only thing that fits is something fast and immediate, which is not going to solve the problem. But when you have good food, you're done. You get to move on to something else. It doesn't hang with you. It doesn't nag at you. It's a complete experience. And then you're open, fresh to something else. But when it's not right, it's never complete. And it's always this gnawing thing that pulls at you to do more of whatever it is, because it's just not fulfilling. It hasn't
It's
found.
it's thrilling to me to grok, to realize that the mentor of all life is fungus. I love it. It's fungus. It's fungus.
That reminds Mark of something.
Yeah, he's going to bring back a book, I'll bet.
Yeah, I mean, that's talk about, what's the word? Humiliation, or that's not the word, but
Humility.
huh?
Putting
Yeah,
us in our place.
it puts us in our place.
Yeah.
Yeah, you know,
Oh, there we
it's
go.
like fungus is smarter than us.
So it's a mushroom.
Oh, looks like a plant.
What kind is that?
I don't actually know what
Looks like hens and chicks.
species it is, but it's psychedelic.
Oh,
Oh.
it's like, oh, okay.
It's a mushroom. Okay. Which,
So
which is
that mushroom is the bearer of real insight, real sight, real realization. The frees up the human mind.
Hmm.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, I was listening to a woman who works with organizations and change in organizations. What she was talking about, her listening to rocks and the wisdom, because she hurt her foot and she was so in angst over, I can't move. How can I do anything? I can't walk out in nature. My whole life is changing. How horrible it's going to be. And she was doing this sitting on a rock. And when she'd gotten done with her angst, she stopped and started to listen. And the rock said, I'm not moving. I don't move. I've been here for a long time. I'm doing fine. You don't need to move in order to experience life. Life comes to you.
Oh, nice.
And at that time, somebody else said that science has proved that rocks have consciousness. Now, I don't know any more about that. I would love to know more about that. I would love to know how they did that. But that's, I mean, it's something I believe for sure. And for me, the physics actually says it, because if you have form, it's an intentful act. You can't have form without wanting to stay together, all those little molecules. So there's some sort of intent that keeps form. So for me, that's consciousness. But I would love to know how science got there.
Love it. This is Friday deep dive, right?
Yeah. Yeah, old wisdom. I mean, yeah, talk about putting us in our place. We're so young as a species.
We are.
Yeah.
I'm wanting to sort of make a very brief and concise offering to this question of the consciousness of rocks, or anything that it's really hard for us to imagine or sense what it might be if it exists for things that are other than us. And if we substitute the word awareness for consciousness, and then think about a rock in terms of what it is as a whole and what it can be aware of in its being, that's starting to, if we want to suggest that rocks have consciousness, it starts to indicate what quality that might be. But then also we can think about the rock in terms of its constituent parts as well, and hold space for, okay, so on the surface of a rock there is, I don't know, calcium or some particular element or molecule. Then based on what that is, what awareness does it have of its surroundings in terms of its interaction with it, that we could then suggest might be what consciousness might be for that. And then try and sort of then connect, well, okay, the rock might have some type of awareness, and its parts might have some type of awareness, and what's the relationship between the parts and the whole. And we can kind of do that exercise with a living organism, an organ, a cell, an atom, a planet. We can kind of consider this invitation of like generalizable consciousness in this way, and potentially get a sense for what it is generalizably, but also what it is for humans, and how that's different, and how we might not want to like use the word consciousness in the way that it's commonly known for things that have something, but not the thing that we have.
I kind of feel that implicate order really helps with that understanding, because the more complex, then the I want to say richer, but the larger the information pool that's able to be used to make those comparisons. Um, and I think that's part of our illusion, is that only the complexity is conscious, instead of understanding that complexity has different characteristics of consciousness, but that doesn't mean it's not conscious.
Mm.
Yeah, it's Montereyno and Varela really did that for me. The understanding that there is consciousness, that any choice. So the choice to stay together is a conscious choice. The choice to keep form is a conscious choice. Yeah, wholeness of the implicate order. Is that David Bohm?
It is, yeah.
Yeah. Yeah, he was actually part of my meditation group.
Mm.
So he didn't talk much, I have to say. He didn't.
His conversations with Krishnamurti are quite
Yeah.
delightful.
Yeah, I've seen that.
Mm.
Something in a related, well, came to me in this moment kind of question that I'm holding in some shape or form quite often is, and it just maybe came up because of something that I looked at. Like we often talk about these theories of things. Like you might, some people might want to say that the idea of biomimicry is a theory about something.
Mhm.
And I have such a strong sense that our job is to get beyond the theory of things and simply to be in relationship. So we don't need a theory to bridge the thing that we don't have. And like it challenges us because it reminds us that there's many things that we can't be in relationship with, or at least can't be directly. And it's in some ways maybe if to kind of headline, so maybe don't place too much emphasis on what I just said, but to headline, the idea is to elevate the things that we sort of have a tangible knowledge or relationship with in our consciousness. So elevate that and maybe like hold less tightly some of the theories we have about it, so that the things that we can really know and be in relationship with have a greater purchase on what we do than theories that that don't have the same quality about them as real experience. In
What
the
I
sense
struck
that would be a thing that would support us taking actions that that are actions that bring us into that connected relationship with all of the living world in ways that staying in a theory space doesn't appear to.
Yeah. Yeah, I'm struck by the difference between theory and story. That story, and both of them are methods to share our experience with the future, you know, to help our children, our other people in our sphere share that experience. But story is what keeps it directly tied to life, and theory kind of can take it off into other directions. Yeah.
It reminds me that the few times I've actually lived fairly close to the natural world, in other words, living in a tent, I got into habits of, visiting something, a tree or a rock, and going there every day. And it was just through the process of seeing the cycles, the shift of whatever it was, season, light, dark, the visitation of birds or other creatures, the plants that flowered or, bloomed, all of those changes became related, part of the relation that that stable object, was going through. And I've read people who've written about such experiences. And it truly makes a huge difference. Obviously, living in this house, I don't get to do that so much anymore. But it's my way of understanding what you're speaking of there, Mark. It definitely, it's something very real.
I kind of think they're both needed too. I don't think it's a one or the other. And I'm saying that because we've had stories for a very long time that talk about how connected we all are and that we're all nature and all of that. I mean, this is really not new information. It's been around for thousands and thousands of years, and yet we haven't got it. You know, a few of us have, but most of us just go, that's a nice story. I love to hear it, all of that, but to apply it to life just doesn't seem to have happened. And yet there's something about the theory that gives you a different perspective on the same thing, which at least for some people seems to be relevant. So it's kind of a both and. Yeah.
I I consider myself very fortunate to have experienced living as nature,
Mhm.
with nature, for 3.5 months alone by myself in a 100-acre forest and consulting the tree. Because I ask a tree, what does nature want from us? What do you want from us? What? And 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 it's it was mainly just to know that I'm nature. I mean, to know that I'm like a tree. You know, I'm organic. Um,
I'll
but
be
it
right
was, go ahead. Oh, just just to be part of it. Just to be nature, to be as nature in nature, and to recognize my own beingness as 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 nature is enough for me. It's more fulfilling than human centric definitions and thinkings. I mean, it feels good to know I belong.
Mhm.
It was interesting, my friends and I went through a long period where, I mean, shoot, 10 years or something, where we thought we had to use some substances to help us, get there. And we suddenly started to realize that just by doing what you just described, Ani, the you could get high on life is what we used to call it.
Yeah, yeah.
And there were no after effects, negative. There were positive after effects, however.
Yeah.
That was quite a transition for me.
Oh, it's a really good feeling to know I belong.
Mhm. Oh, yeah,
I belong here.
yeah.
I guess just by virtue of the fact that I'm alive.
Mhm.
As other living things are.
I've often ruminated on whether this desire to be and do, and then I want to add the word more after that, um, whether that's innate or whether that's a response to the emptiness of not having.
I don't get that in response to the emptiness of not having. I don't understand that.
Well, of not having the connection, of not feeling, with not, I mean, you experience being part of nature by being in nature. And if we don't have that, then does the desire to want to be more come in to replace that comfort feeling? Or is there something about us as a species which is necessary and it currently is being expressed in that form? I mean, part of my belief about partnering with nature is that there is something new to be born in that partnership. It's not just because certainly, I mean, the indigenous way of life persisted for thousands and thousands and thousands of years. So that was being with nature. And then there was this change, this split that happened. And I kind of believe that everything has a purpose, and that there's nothing like wrong. It may not be effective or well understood or those all these other little caveats, but there must be, in my view, or in this theory, some sort of purpose for this split. Because there's something that I mean, there's certainly been things we've gained by being separate from nature. I mean, we wouldn't be where we wouldn't have the internet, we wouldn't have the chemistry around health, we wouldn't have so many things that we do value if we hadn't done that. And yet, there have been consequences. And so part of the angst of this time, I feel, is well, what do we want to lose? How are we going to lose it? How are we going to keep what we want and still reconnect to nature? How do we do that? Can we do that? That's part of this process, I think. And so that just, I mean, I do believe we're here for a reason, that there's something we contribute to the whole, or we wouldn't be here, because that's how nature works. So that's kind of like a done deal. The question is, what is it? Or how can we be in tune with that, is maybe the better, so that we can actually fulfill that promise, whatever that promise was.
Yeah.
So just ruminating on all those things. I don't have answers.
Well, I mean, you really inspired something in me. It has to do with virtually any spiritual path that I've ever studied. And I've been on one for a long time. It's that, it seems pretty clear from the ancient stories that mankind shifted, many thousands of years ago. Different ages are given, but, many thousands of years ago, when people started to think, instead of being beholden, living under, say, the mantle of a concept of God, people started believing they could be as God. Then you keep trying, you keep driving, because to be as God means, well, obviously, I'm not up to that yet, but maybe I could be if I prove here, prove there, prove there. And, it's futile, because to me, God is the interchange of plasmic networks throughout the universe. And that is so beyond anything that we can possibly comprehend with this brain, as amazing as it is.
We're cosmic.
Well, we are, but not, we don't know how to operate at that level. So therefore, we have to receive emanations of what's happening, man.
We dumb it down.
And I sense this readily enough that I know that it's real. There is discernment is a real thing, and it picks up on, as you say, that cosmic energy. That's not it's a belief, but it's been proven out by me. So, I mean, in a sense, we can't possibly reach for the sky by our brain cells alone. It wasn't created to do that. It wasn't by evolution by whatever methods were there, it wasn't meant to do that, or it isn't capable. However, we can very much work within the cosmic order, if you will, and be very useful to the planet, to the natural world. So in a nutshell, in very basic language, that's my cosmic view. Anyway, I live that way, so
When
we'll see how it works. I haven't walked out into the desert yet.
when I turn my attention to the fact that I am cosmic in origin, it turns something on in me. It's like, okay, yeah, that's true. I mean, factually, evolutionarily, it's true. We are cosmic in nature. I mean, if you really look at, study, read, whatever about evolution, it started galactically and cosmically. And it's all part of the same thing. But when you contemplate it, turn my attention to it, it turns my living system on. It's like things in me connect when I'm aware.
So the question is how to live from that space.
To live from that space. And it feels good. I like it.
There's been some research on emotions, and one of the things they have come about is that there's something about chills. When you experience chills in your body, what is that? How do people do that? What kinds of situations generate that? What does that have to say about our experience? And for me, it's always been a recognition of truth, that there's some truth in that there's that connection, which is kind of what I hear you speaking to, Ani, that resonates as truth.
Yes.
And so then the question for me would be how to, and if you stayed in that, would the chills continue, or is it only when you step out of it and step back in that you get them? But still how to live in a place where, because the other piece of that is your energy is elevated, your vibrations are elevated. So how to live in a way that is your constant experience of your energy and your vibrations being elevated and tingling and in concert with the rest of life.
When I go to Bristol Farms and get an ashwagandha latte, which I looked up, what is ashwagandha? And the word adaptogen came to me. And adaptogen, now I don't know where I'm going with this, but it's all part of what we're talking about. And adaptogen connects the part of a system. It connects the parts of a system, and when that happens, something turns on. And that happens with, I understand that. And it's like the word, well, ashwagandha is part of the root of something.
It's a plant.
It's adaptogen. It connects things. I don't know where and how, but I experience it happening. And especially when my attention is on, when I'm thinking about it, it's like doing. And it's a practice of mine. I turned myself on. Yeah. I mean, isn't that wonderful? And it's all nature. It's all connected. I mean, adaptogen connects the points of a system. And it happens all the time. You're just not aware of it.
Yeah, in a way, that explains for me my experience here in Spokane, because when I got here, I mean, I'd only been here a few weeks when I was plugged into the city system, and everything that I've done was effortless and joyful. And the successes have been there. They're not like my successes, but the system has improved because of things I've done, and I could see that happening. And it's just been wonderful to just be part of that blossoming, you know. And that sounds very much like what you're talking about. And I think that's my picture for us being connected to nature, is that it is like that. You don't have to think about it or plan about it or strategy. Well, there's plan and strategy, but that's part of the game. It's how to make things happen. It's not, it's how, it's levels. So I was very strategic in what I did, but it was to make the stuff happen out here. I didn't feel like I was driven from a strategy inside, if that makes any sense at all. It was much more responsive in the moment. So it's not like planning out what to do. It's being
Responsive.
taking advantage of the situation, being in the loop enough that you knew how to make it work within its own context without making it different or having to use a hammer to make things happen. They just kind of did, because that's just, how it was. Network chiropractic is like that. You lay on a table and the guy hits you here and he hits you here and he walks out the room and your body goes, oh, and it realigns. Your spine gets a realigned. It does it by itself. You don't have to do anything, and you're going, I'm paying for this, but it works. He does nothing, just tap and then leave you alone to let your body assimilate that and respond to it. And it does. And that's kind of how I think of it.
Yeah. And to have that frame of reference as your frame of reference.
Yes.
It works.
Yeah.
It's wonderful.
Yeah, and it's non-effort. You don't have to effort to do it. You just have to be responsive. There's a difference.
Yeah, because we're alive. Because
Yeah.
it's life.
Yeah.
And we're just learning more about it, life, and experientially and contemplatively. I mean, it's very cool. It humbles me.
Mhm.
And empowers me to even say this stuff. It's like, oh my God, I know something. It's awesome. And that I'm cosmic? What? I come, I'm galactic in source. And it's all true.
Yeah.
It's just awesome. It brings tears to my eyes.
The thing that connects all of this for me is in terms of like what it is that we're doing here as a species of biological life. Um, it seems to me that this moment in time, more than any other, is helping us see that it's not that there is something for us to do that we should be doing or we must be doing, but rather to become aware and accept that we are doing it
Yes,
already.
Yeah.
right.
And so there's sort of an awareness and acceptance of that, and then a sort of a second level step in this awareness can be, well, how are we doing with this thing that we are doing? Which is to say, to have some sort of sense of the cosmos, some sufficient sense of the cosmos to have a sense for the direction that we as a species in what we are doing, like where it's leading to, or what we are bringing forth. And in some ways to kind of link back to that previous idea that I didn't necessarily describe very well, in my awareness at least, is the way we are as a humanity at the moment. We aren't doing well, and it is going to end. This phase is going to end, and when we become aware, if it is true, and we become aware of it and accept it, it encourages us, or it's what informs groups of people coming together and trying to bring about something different, like the next phase of humanity that is in a different direction than we are at the moment.
And and the interesting thing is that it's all part of evolution. It's
Exactly.
natural. It's our maturation is natural phenomenon.
And some of that's going to be painful and not look good.
What?
And then some of that will be painful and not look good because we're trying different things. And it's like, oops, that's not it. Next.
Uh-huh. Right. It's like every species that has evolved more than we have. Like horses have evolved longer than us.
Mhm.
You know, and they've learned how to be with each other. But and we're learning because that's what evolution does.
Yeah.
And,
Yeah. I think that's a really good, sorry, Mark. I think that's a really good point though, that they get along with each other is one of the key pieces of our understanding, which we are stumbling around like crazy. Because there's no other species that kills itself the way we do.
Right.
You know, they just don't. That's not that they don't disagree, and it's not that they don't not like each other sometimes, because all animals, but they don't kill each other in the same way we do. So we have to master that ability to accept our diversity in a way that doesn't
I'm not sure.
generate that anger and fear.
I'm not sure the word master is the right word though.
Okay.
It's more evolve or surrender or submit or yield to,
Yeah,
you know,
that's a skill.
it is. It's maturation.
Yeah, yeah.
The young species, we're the youngest species on Earth, from what I've read.
Well, and we seem to feel that if we change, we lose ourselves, and that's not true. That's the that's the sort of gift, is that the change actually increases who we are. It doesn't, we don't lose ourselves. We gain ourselves in doing that. Yeah.
I really appreciate this opportunity that we all have online with each other to have this kind of dialogue. Thank you, Kathryn, again.
Oh, well, thank everybody. I couldn't do it by myself. It wouldn't be any fun.
The closing thing that, again, I think it connects with what we're talking about here in terms of like kind of what we will do as humans. We can also be becoming aware, and this is kind of like what I heard in the last few things that were suggested or spoken as well, which is for us to do something substantive beyond us as a species, it requires us to be able to coordinate that within ourselves as a species in a healthy way. So, like, in some ways, it's on the pathway to us to making an offering as a species that is beyond us in any substantive way. We can definitionally know that it will coincide with us our coordination together coming to the level that is required for that to occur. So we can kind of lean back on that and know that always that if what we are doing in a given moment is supporting the emergence of that coordination in healthy ways, whether it be in a 4-person group or a nested 1,000,000-person group, that will be a feature of humanity as a whole doing something substantive, sort of as an external act or offering into the cosmos beyond us. And it's not to say that we must do that or we will do that. However, us doing that will coincide with us having that level of coordination amongst us. And
I just want to say maturation is a natural phenomenon. We're nature. We're maturing. It's an evolutionary phenomenon. It's not so yielding to that, embracing that is more cooperative than thinking we have something that we have to do.
Yeah.
It's a maturation of what we are that we yield to.
Yeah.
Mm.
And with that, we will see everybody next week.
Oh, okay.
Looking forward to it.
Thank you all.
Thank you all very much. Bye.
Bye.